This is a meditation on temperance. I'm going to talk about temperance for the next 30 minutes. I don't know what exactly I'm going to say. For me, this is an exercise which helps me to focus my attention on the concept. My goal here to train my imagination, to bring the concept of temperance to my mind and see what I will say about it. Usually on YouTube, I see many people discussing philosophical, psychological, scientific concepts, providing 5, 10, 15, 20 tips and tricks how you can understand this or that concept. For me, most of them are what I would call aggressively dull. So people memorize certain concepts. They use knowledge which they derive from different sources, from Wikipedia, from other videos, from books, and they think that they understand the concept perfectly if they can explain it and talk about this concept, like this or that concept, by using their own language. For me, I prefer to think about concepts before I start studying them. For example, I now know about temperance very little. I've read a little bit on Wikipedia when I studied the concept of virtue a few weeks ago. I read something Aristotle, and my understanding now is vague. But I use my intuition and my background to figure out what the concept actually may mean if I look at it from a perspective of an average person, of an ordinary person who doesn't study such concepts on a kind of philosophical level. So for me, this is an attempt to think about the concept of temperance from an ordinary point of view and see what exactly I can say. I know that at the end of my investigation, which is going to be the end of this week, I'll gather a lot of knowledge, and my understanding of temperance will be different from that which I have right now. And the more knowledge I will have, the better I'll understand it. But to get this knowledge, I first have to be aware of my ignorance. And this exercise, this meditation, is my way of looking at my own ignorance. I have to be aware that I don't understand what is temperance, that I don't know exactly what it is. Of course, on a superficial level, I may say it's the same as self-control. It's our ability to use our mind, to control our feelings, to control our desires, to not be a slave to instant gratification, to be able to postpone the pleasure. But it's very superficial understanding. Like from my experience, over the last few years, I've been studying on a weekly basis different concepts. And I've noticed that most of these concepts, at the beginning, when I start studying them, even if I may talk about them for an hour, for a few hours, it's still very superficial understanding. And after I go through the process of studying, after I dedicate a week thinking about these concepts, studying something on the internet, watching lectures, trying to analyze these concepts from different perspectives, I see that my understanding enriches immensely. And still, I see that there's infinite field almost in every concept which I may discover. I know that if I start studying temperance, there's no way I can get to the point where I would say, now I know everything. I'm aware that each concept is infinite, and a man can dedicate an entire life studying just one concept. and he or she may go beyond, average experience. But it's not what I want. I want to dedicate just 1 week to a particular concept and analyze it in a profound way. So I want to think about such concepts which I'm studied, like temperance, virtue, prudence, intelligence, consciousness, duty, risk, prejudices, freedom, justice, greatness, attention, memory, imagination, whatever. I want to dedicate just 1 week to see how deep I can go. Some of these concepts, I really like to understand them deeper than just which a weekly analysis allows. So some of these concepts, like, for example, attention, memory, and imagination, I started working on analyzing these concepts, I guess, in 2013. It was the first time when I became aware that I want, what I'm doing, I'm actually practicing exercising my faculties. And all these faculties, attention, memory, imagination, they may be exercised. And I started making up some exercises which helped me to develop these faculties. And now what I'm doing here, again, is just improving one of these faculties. I'm working on my imagination. And I'm trying to see what I can say if I have to talk about temperance. And after I use my imagination, then I go, and of course, there's now memory involved too, since I have a huge background in studying philosophy, in reading books, and I can easily find some examples. I trust my intuition. So here I'm just relying on my intuition and see what I can say. But everything what I say, for me, it's irrelevant in terms of real understanding. I know that this is it's the first step. So I make a first step, then I get back, I look at myself, look at what I was talking, at what I was saying, I analyze it, and then I go and check out different sources. Again, read Wikipedia, read Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, watch some videos on YouTube, and read some books, mostly written by philosophers. So now again, intuition. So I'm trying to use my intuition to discover temperance. And what could I say about temperance? What do I actually know? In my practical experience, I have lots of knowledge, since I have practiced self-control and mind control and whatever you may call it for years. So I used writing for these purposes. I was writing for the last 14 years. I started writing my journal in 2008, and since 2011, I was writing on a daily basis. So for the last decade, I was writing on a daily basis. And this tool, writing, helped me to balance my senses, helped me to balance my desires, my emotions. I've learned to control almost everything in terms of, whenever I want to get pleasure, whenever I want to get more dopamine, whenever I want to go on the internet, I am aware of my desires, of my cravings, and I, if necessary, may easily suppress them or rationalize them. For example, every day I dedicate few hours from, like, every morning, let's say, I do some exercises and I don't allow myself to touch the computer at all. And I don't have a phone. I don't have in instant access to the internet. I don't buy a phone, especially exactly because of that. So I don't want to have, I don't want to be controlled by the internet and by my phone. And computer, yeah, I can, it seems that I can control it much easier than if I would buy a phone and have an access to the internet just in few seconds. And since it requires some time to turn on the computer, and it's kind of act which you have to you have to perform. And every morning I delay my entrance on the internet for a few hours. Sometimes, of course, it may take less, sometimes it may take more, but usually it's not hard for me to control my feelings and to control my feelings through the use of language. And I prefer to write, so I use, again, temperance. For me, it's let's make a definition, like the simple definition. For me, it's self-control, and by self-control I mean it's the control of one's feelings and one's desires by use of language. So I use language, I think, oh, we may say through thinking, through rationalizing one's behavior. So I know that I may control my behavior through my senses. And if I have a certain desire, if I have passion, or if I want something so much, I still may use language and rationalize this desire and see whether or not it actually makes sense to pursue this desire. So the problem is that there are so many different desires which I have, and sometimes those desires become very aggressive. For example, a desire to play video games, or a desire to watch porn, or a desire to jerk off, or a desire to smoke, or a desire to drink, or a desire to communicate with people, or a desire to write some stupid comment on YouTube, or a desire to do all sorts of different things. And I think that there's language, there's such thing as language or temperance. We may say that temperance is a part of language which may be used to control these desires. So for example, if I want to play video games and I see that now it's inappropriate, and most of the time for me it's inappropriate since I have different goals, and I identify with these goals, and for me playing video games, it's a part of my childish behavior, which I still can get rid of, but which I actually prefer to consider not as myself. So for me, it's just a kind of alien part of me. It's like something that I inherited from my childhood, and I don't like this. I have to, like, I have a goal to avoid this behavior completely. So I don't want to play video games, but still sometimes I find this desire. So I find sometimes I get bored with studying, and I see that I have free time, and there are some questions like, what if I just play for a few hours to relax, or for 5 hours to relax? And usually if I allow this thought or this desire to get over, then to take over. If I allow this desire to take over, I see that it's not just about 5 hours. It usually takes control over my thinking and over my perceptions and over my behavior for weeks and sometimes months. So I know that if now it's like, there's some alcoholics, people who drink, and if they don't drink, it seems everything is going right. But as soon as they drink just one glass of whatever, beer or vodka, they become, their behavior changes, and for weeks and for months, they just drink all the time and they can't stop it. Then they stop again for half a year. They have a normal life until they come back and again drink, and it's just goes on and on and on. And in my experience, it's almost the same thing. So for me, video games, it's like a drug, and I can't get rid of them completely since half a year, 3 months. Yeah, I'm still struggling with that. So I started my journal, especially my daily journal, which I started writing in 2011. I guess in 3-4 months, in the end of 2011, in 3-4 months, in April of 2012, there was this behavior. It occurred. I started playing video games, and since that moment, basically all my journals, they are attempts to get rid of this type of behavior. So I talk about smoking, and I quit smoking. Like, I was struggling with smoking, and I quit smoking in 2015. And before 2015, there were like half a year, for example, I may write on a daily basis. I may persuade myself to study, to do some exercises, to go to the gym, to run, to go to banya, to go to the lake, to swim, to do all sorts of things, and to read books, to invest lots of time in my intelligence, in my power, in my strength. But then after half a year, it just reaches the dead end, and I find myself playing video games, and I quit writing. But then after a few weeks again, I start writing again, and they continued for the next half a year. And in my experience, this like my journals and the evolution of my language. So the better my language becomes, and now I'm talking about in Russian, not English. So the better my language had been developed, the easier it was for me to control my passions. And finally, at 2015, when my language was extremely powerful, so I could write amazing poems. I could convince myself by writing some philosophical articles, philosophical essays, and simply most of my writing I did it for myself. So I tried to use writing and development of my language for the purposes of attacking my behaviors, my desires, which were crazy. So most of these desires, they were irrational. I knew that they didn't bring me anything what I really want, since like what I want, let's say what I'm consciously aware. So on a conscious level, there are certain things which I want and which I working on and which I want to get. And most of these things, again, it's like self-development, learning, understanding, certain exercises, certain habits, certain activities, and neither drinking, nor smoking, nor playing video games, nor whatever, jerking off and watching porn wasn't related to what I wanted. But still, since these were habits, I couldn't get rid of them. But the better my language was, the easier it was for me to control these habits. But sometimes when these habits, for example, playing video games in 2016, it was really powerful. So I had a very, let's say, one of my chief activity, which I was doing when I was studying Russian, was writing poetry. And, just reading lots of poetry and writing poetry. I liked it so much. And in 2016, I started attacking this activity. So I've realized that poetry actually leads nowhere. And I started reading critics and classics, Russian classics who wrote against poetry, and socialists, and some political theorists who consider poetry as just useless toy, or like useless game, something meaningless. And I attacked this part of my identity. So I tried to kind of get rid of this activity of writing poetry, and I was quite successful. But when I and when I reached this, let's say, conviction, when I convinced myself finally that I don't want to be a poet, I don't want to dedicate my life to doing something silly like poetry, which I thought that time was silly, and now I'm not quite sure. But anyway, so I had 3 months of playing video games. Since video games basically they helped me to get rid of this belief that I'm a poet and I have to write poetry and I have to read as much poetry as possible. And this is my my life. And for 3 years, but 3 months in the summer, this behavior, like playing video games, it basically was in control. And it used language to rationalize itself, and there was kind of inner war. But still, like language, in my what I'm trying to understand now about like temperance, right? So we have temperance, and I think that temperance, it's our language. Mostly it consists of language, but it's certain intentionality, and this intention relates to our emotions. So it's kind of, I'm not sure that there's a particular intention behind temperance, other than just being able to control your emotions. So whenever, and your desires. So whenever, if there is a big desire for something, irrational desire, which gets control over all other desires and tries to tyrannize these desires, or one's consciousness, tyrannize one's language. So for example, again, I may have a desire to become a poet, and then everything I'm thinking about may become poetry. So I have an idea I can have an idea fix and think about it for months or years, or my entire life. And some the greatest poets, for example, if you take uh, them as an examples, they are these people who were controlled by just one particular desire. So they wanted to have to learn poetry, to write poetry, to become the greatest poets, and all other behaviors, all other motives were suppressed by this desire, or they just were organized to serve this one purpose. And the temperance, in this case, we may say that, well, of course, of course, it depends on every particular individual, but essentially, we may say that temperance, when you see that one of your desires tries to control all other desires, you may apply temperance. It's like government. So we have 3 branches in government, and each branch serves as a as a mechanism which suppresses other branches. So if we, I don't even know how to call them in English, but in Russian, so there's one branch which is like law, right? Judges, constitution, law, and police, for example. It's also a branch of government, or army. It's there's a leader, let's say, of army, a leader of the leader of the court. the damn it. It's like I'm trying to talk about things which I know in Russian, and it's terrible. I'm trying to translate from Russian to English, and I see it doesn't work. Okay, let's not talk about this. But on a personal level, we also have something like that. So we may control our desires if they become so crazy and bring us lots of troubles. And the mechanism which controls these desires is temperance. So we have to have temperance to be able to see that something overcomes, something in us wants to get more than it deserves. And on a, what's the word? For average people, it may be something like food. So some people, for them, temperance, so to have temperance means to be able to eat as much as they need, and no more, no less. And again, yeah, I guess it's possible to eat less, but not more. So some people, now it's one of the biggest problems in Western societies, that there's so much food and the people just eat, and they can't control their appetite. And temperance here, it's exactly this mechanism. And for me, once again, it's language. It's a particular type of language, maybe a counter desire. So if you struggle with your appetite, if you want to eat more and you can control it, you basically develop temperance as an opposite of this desire. So you say, okay, this is my problem. This is something that I want to, wrestle with. And you use this temperance, this idea, or this mechanism, and you try to think about it. You try to attack your desire to eat more than you want through your thoughts. You start writing about it, and you start talking about it, but not in terms of complaining how much you eat, but in a kind of philosophical way. So you ask, okay, what can I do? There's a problem. I eat too much. How can I change it? And you do it on a daily basis. That's the idea. So you don't just, write down 5, paragraphs how you would change your food habits and eating behavior, and then you do not. No, it's like it's a daily pursuit. So you write it today, then you see if it works, you continue writing tomorrow, and you develop your ideas around this problem. And the better your language becomes, the easier it is for you to control this desire. So it's the same what I was doing with smoking, with playing video games. I'm playing video games, I'm right for half an hour, half a year, half an hour every day. For half an hour, I spent half an hour every day for half a year to write something against my desire. But not just against my desire. So first is, of course, I may write for 1 week when, like, for example, now let's say I lose self-control, I lose temperance, and self-control is another word for temperance. I lose self-control and I start playing video games. So then at some moment I recover from this madness, let's say, and for the first week I may write about it. I may write about this behavior and attack it, and use language essentially to convince myself that it's stupid, that what I was doing, I don't need it, I need to do something else. And then for this week, I find what exactly I want to do. For example, I may find that I want to study philosophy, I want to read Schopenhauer, or I want to read Kant, or I want to read whatever, Hume, Locke, Berkeley, Descartes, Spinoza, Aristotle, Plato, Seneca, whoever. So I want to read these guys, and then I just continue writing about what I read from these guys. Or, if I do something, if I do sport, for example, I decide, okay, I need to focus on meditation, or on running, or on doing regular exercises like squats and push-ups and pull-ups on a daily basis. And I continue writing about these exercises and analyzing what I'm doing, and it helps me to get rid of, for example, this behavior of playing video games. And writing itself, like the better my language becomes, the easier it is for me to keep this desire, this motivation to control it. But sometimes, of course, I see that often I may, in Russian, it occurred many times. So I find some passion. For example, 2013, in the beginning of 2013, 8 years ago, I started recording video journal, and I decided, you may watch this video. It's in Russian, but anyway, you may find there are subtitles, and you may watch it with translation. You may find it. I'll probably put a link here, or no, you may discover it on your own. Doesn't matter. It's just on the bottom of my channel. So you go there and you see that I use this activity, this video journal, this self-talk, to attack my desire to play video games. And I found it, when I did it the first time, I found it extremely powerful. And I've realized, I want to work on my language. I want to improve my speech. I want to get rid of all fillers. I want to use perfect grammar. And I want to be kind of funny. I don't want to be dull. I don't want to speak like an idiot. And then for half a year after that, I'm working on developing my speech, developing my language, developing this exercise. And then at a particular moment, then I went to the south, to the sea, and I was there for a week or for a couple of weeks, and I didn't have an access to the internet. I didn't have an access to a video camera. I couldn't record myself. And somehow, like this motivation, video games, I basically became relaxed, or maybe thoughtless or careless, and kind of I forgot about what was I doing. And then it all led that when I got back from the sea after a week, I actually was there more than a week, maybe 2 weeks, I started playing video games again after half a year. And then it took me another few weeks. I again gained control, and I started recording videos. I continued my journal. And the point is that when I was like doing one exercise, the point, if you do it, if you take it just as a mean to overcome your negative habit, it's not as powerful as when you take it as the thing in itself. So you may say, this is a wonderful exercise. Doesn't actually, I don't need it only to control my passions. I need it for all other purposes. And it's interesting to do this exercise and to see how it may be, developed, to see how far you can go. And then again, you do the exercise, and you do, the point is, if you just use one exercise, at some point you may fail, you may be bored, or you may say, okay, it's terrible, I need a break, I need some time to recover, to recover my strength, I'm tired, for example, after half a year. In this case, this previous behavior may come in and cause all sorts of troubles. And video, like talking to yourself, is just one thing. Another thing may be writing. Another thing may be any passion, like you may develop a different passion and study language, for example, or learn martial arts, or learn something else, dancing, whatever, running, swimming, playing any kind of social role, go to find a job and do certain work for whatever. Okay, temperance. Yeah, it seems, as I said, let me just let me summarize what I've already said. So at the beginning, once again, I was trying to explain what I'm doing here, and I tried to draw a distinction between simply talking about what you know and developing your imagination, developing your intuition through free stream of consciousness. So for me, what I'm doing here is it's exactly this. So I'm trying to develop my free stream of consciousness. I'm trying to be free, and I try to not limit myself with any purpose rather than analyzing the idea. So there's the idea, the concept, it's temperance, and I'm trying to stay consistent in talking about temperance. I'm trying to not get too much aside. And my purpose is, again, to trust my intuition and to see what exactly can I say about temperance. And I started talking about like self-control, how one controls one's desires and passions through writing, through developing language. And I basically developed an example from my personal experience. So I know that for me, temperance, it's mostly language, and it's a particular type of language which I use to organize my behavior, to organize my activity, to organize my life. And I know that the stronger is the language, the stronger language is, the better I can control my desires, and the less they bother me. So, since sometimes there's all sorts of irrational desires. You go around the street, you see a man or a woman in an expensive car, and you may have a desire, oh, I also want a car like that. And then you may spend the rest of your life just working for 10, 15, 20 hours. 20, I guess it's impossible, but okay, 10, 15 hours a day for 10 years just to buy a car. See, and then you buy a car and you sit down and say, damn it, I spent half of my life, or 1/3 of my life, or 1/4 of my life working to buy a stupid car, but I don't actually need this car. It's just stupid. Why was I so stupid? Why did I allow my desire to take control over my over my mind? So here, it's like mind is language. The development of the language is the thing in itself. So I work on my language not because I want to get something, but the work itself is the goal. And then it's the same as studying language. So I studying English, for example. So for many people, let me check how much I'm talking already. Oh, okay, this is damn it, it's so exciting. So I set a timer before I started doing this exercise, half an hour, and now I felt before I checked it, I felt as if it was like already half an hour. And when I checked it, it was exactly like the second. So it was the time, like I checked it, and there's half an hour has gone. And it's so wonderful. Like I have yeah, I may conclude. Of course, it was an accident. Obviously, next time if I would let's say set a goal to talk for half an hour without looking at the time and be aware like when the time ends, I would probably record 100 or 1,000 videos, and still I will not be able to do the same what I've done just right now. since it was like I checked and it was exactly half an hour. It's so wonderful. Like imagine that you like start talking and you say, I'm going to talk, or thinking, and you say, I'm going to think for half an hour. And then at the moment when you want to look at the clock, it's exactly half an hour, like second to second. That's wonderful. Okay, now I think I have to finish the meditation. And yeah, now I see a little bit more. See, I have experience. I have lots of experience in things which I am discussing, but I have very little vocabulary. And it bothers me since I start talking about it, I can't explain anything. And studying for me is basically studying vocabulary, studying certain concepts which help to describe one particular concept which I'm focused right now on. Damn, my language gets much worse now. Anyway, I have experience. I'm studying something related, like to describe this experience. But once again, when I'm studying, I always find something which is much bigger than my experience. I find somebody else's experiences recorded in words. And it's not just improving my conceptual understanding. It's improving, like sometimes I may have an experience of doing something, and then I start studying the thing, and I realized that like I never actually understood what I was doing. But after I studied like metaphors, for example, yeah, I watched recently few weeks ago a course on metaphors, and I've realized that conceptual blending, for example, it's a scientific scientific idea, scientific theory, and I was using it for like more than a decade, but I never was able to understand what exactly I was doing. But now, well, I was able to understand, but I wasn't able to explain it in scientific terms. But after I watched these lectures by George Lakoff, I've realized that he has an extremely rich conceptual apparatus or conceptual network to talk about things which I was doing in practice. And so wonderful. Of course, even now I can talk about it as well as this man can do. But still, it's so exciting to see, like, to practice certain things and then to learn how to describe them, especially in foreign language. Okay, that's all. I'm going to do more meditations on temperance and studying streams later. Now, let's